going to freak me out to have to stand in one spot for 10 minutes. Okay, so I totally had no idea that you were going to sort of end on a Borg note, but so I'm going to pick up on a Borg note. And I thought, well, how exactly do you segue between embroidery and bionic arms? So Patrick Stewart as the Borg clearly is the way to go. There you go, enjoy that. So I study Han embroidery, and Han embroidery is a type of embroidery specific to China, and it was specifically used on imperial robes. My studies started with the MacTaggart Art Collection under the supervision of Dr. Lisa Claypool, and I got a research grant to study more Han embroidery. Fantastic. Oh, God. And the gentleman who I was pursuing to mentor me further in my studies was a master Han embroiderer in Beijing. And I ended up sort of losing track of him in my hopes to find him. And then Lisa sends me this email, Stitches from Time. And I find Ren Ben Rong, who is a living, breathing Han embroidery expert. His family's been doing Han embroidery for 5 generations, and I'm like, yes! So I read this article, and what's at the bottom of the article? More embroidery! So, Yang Xiaoting, I'm kind of like, oh my goodness, they're both in the same city. So, I'm looking up addresses, trying to find phone numbers, and I have a extremely helpful friend, and she's helping me find things. She's doing some translation for me, and she's just super wonderful. And it's before I get ready to go, and she says to me, so Anne, don't be surprised if none of your information is correct. And then she says, have a good trip. So I get to Wuhan, and sure enough, none of my information is correct. So I go to the addresses that I have, I try the phone numbers, none of them work. And so I think I've come all this way and I'm trying to learn embroidery, and I hire an assistant. So my assistant is brilliant. And the first person she finds is Yang Xiaoting. And Yang Xiaoting she's really amazing. She's really innovative, she's really creative, she's really inventive with Han embroidery. And we totally hit it off. She barely speaks any English, I barely speak any Chinese, and we both love embroidery. So we're just on the same level on all points. So she's extremely kind and very generous to me, and she invites me to fashion shows, and I host her daughter's piano lessons. And all this time, my assistant is continuing to find Ren Ben Rong. And of course, I've said to Yang Xiaoting, I've said to her, you know, I'm also looking for Ren Ben Rong. If you could give me any help on that, that'd be really awesome. And she sort of gives me this blank look like, who's Ren Ben Rong? So my assistant ends up finding Ren Ben Rong. And there's, Wuhan has this really quite lovely cultural pavilion. And in this cultural pavilion, laser beam. Ren Ben Rong's studio is right here, and Yang Xiaoting, she has a couple studios that are located throughout the city, and she also has a studio that's right here. So I end up, you know, walking across the street and going to meet Ren Ben Rong, which was really amazing because very kind man, and he asked me to come and study with him while I'm in Wuhan, which was exactly what I was hoping for. Fashion shows are great, hosting piano lessons and piano recitals are great, but doing embroidery, that's why I'm there. So I end up studying with him for a bit, and this is me, it's proof. And so while I'm there doing embroidery, I there's sort of like one specific teacher who I'm learning under, and there's different people who are teaching me at the same time. And Ren Ben Rong's granddaughter is one of them, and he's an older gentleman by now. He's maybe his late 80s, maybe early 90s. And so while I'm there, I begin to be able to differentiate between who did which piece of embroidery in his studio, because some of them like certain color combinations and some of them like particular ways of creating certain textures and patterns in the embroidery that they do. So it was really fantastic for me to actually be able to develop an eye for something, for such particulars about the constructions, and particularly relating to sort of the greater picture of production of robes and imperial robes and the difference between who creates what. So my visa is about to expire, and I jump on a plane because I had thought, well, I'm in Asia, I might as well do something good. So I was invited by Domaling Nunnery, and Domaling Nunnery is part of the Tibetan Nuns Project, which is a group in, they have their head offices in Seattle. And they had invited me to come and teach sewing to their nuns and in their workshop. So I had brought all my sewing stuff. And when I get there and I'm teaching, they've actually got someone there who's a really excellent sewer. And I'm thinking, well, it's kind of ridiculous for me to teach them sewing when they could just teach themselves how to sew. They just sort of need to spread out their knowledge pool better. But they don't know how to do any embroidery. So I'm kind of like, well, we're going to learn embroidery. So, but I want to teach them something that's actually relevant to Tibetan people. So we start off with some basics about embroidery. So we learn how to stretch fabric on hoops and how to work with the threads. And so this is some of my nuns and a lovely Tibetan lady doing embroidery. And I thought, oh my goodness, I need to do more research because I know just about nothing about Tibetan embroidery. And so I've seen some pouches, I've seen sort of some really basic stuff, and it's recommended to me that I go to that I sort of walk down the street. There's this great place called Norbalinka, and they have a Tibetan doll museum. So I go to the doll museum for inspiration, and how can you not be inspired by that? So I'm looking around and I think Norbalinka is awesome. There's so many great things going on at Norbalinka. I can hear the looms looming, and there's woodworkers in there, and I think to myself, I would love a tour. I would so totally love a tour. I'd love to see all sort of the nooks and crannies and see what's going on here. And so I find someone and I say to them, can I see more? And so they hook me up with a tour. And I end up in this fantastic workroom. And this is a gentleman who's working on the Tibetan people have Tibetan horsehair applique embroidery. And it's absolutely stunning. All of their fabrics. So the colored lines there that you can see, so all of these lines here are, this is horsehair wrapped in silk thread. And all of these pieces here, like this piece here is maybe 2 millimeters wide with horsehair wrapped in silk thread. And so all of this fabric here is custom made. They have people there who develop their textile patterns. They're based on historical pieces. And so they have their pieces made, all of the fabric is custom made, and then they're all cut into the appliques and it's embroidered on top of it. And so I'm asking questions, and I'm asking about adhesives and tail hair and mane hair and what do you use for stopping fraying and blah, blah, blah. And this gentleman walks over and he sort of, really takes an interest in me and the questions that I'm asking. And he, so we get talking, and so the end of the day comes and he says to me, you can come back anytime you want to. And I'm like, that's fantastic, I have so many questions. So I start coming back. And so it puts the question in my head, though, how is it, what else do I not know? And that leads me to, my time's almost up, so maybe I won't continue. I'm going to respect the clock, because you guys were so adamant about this. Make it end beautifully. Is there anything more beautiful than that? I'm sorry, that's just great. I'm going to leave it there. Oh, it turned out that the gentleman who I was asking, who I ended up chatting with, was the Dalai Lama's tailor. You know, because it's such a, as far as the story goes, it's really, as far as I'm concerned, it's not really a key element to it. I'm like, this man, what he knows is so incredible that him being the Dalai Lama's tailor was kind of a side, a side bit. Excellent. Let's hear him.
What's the definition of hot embroidery?
Hot embroidery. Hot embroidery is specifically, it is... oh goodness, the stitch lengths, do you want like how nerdy of a definition do you want? Medium nerdy. So hot embroidery, oh, I'm supposed to point at the computer. Okay, so color combinations are really particular to hot embroidery. A lot of it is, if you do embroidery, or if you're familiar with embroidery, you'll sort of be familiar with some of the stitches. But it's particularly the symbol set that makes it really unique, and the colors that are used, and that it's done with silk threads, and it's a short stitch embroidery. It's not a long stitch embroidery, which is kind of key for identifying it. So a lot of it is the color, the patterns, and context.
One more.
Sure.
One in the center, right there. Yeah.
Is the skill being maintained, or is it getting lost?
China does this wonderful thing where people who practice historical crafts get designated intangible cultural heritage, and the government provides them with room and board, and they get paid to take on apprentices. So they are really, really avid about maintaining traditional cultural practices. So, yeah. No. The answer is no.
Thank you.
Thank you.